Here we are, episode number 28, believe it or not, Placed in Shelter with your host, Ryan Catarozoli. Glad to see a lot of the same faces. If you are catching this on YouTube and would like to join in on the conversation, you can always use the link in the description below. We are live 3 p.m. Central Time, Monday through Fridays. We would love to have you. And today I'm going to start out with NRA. And, you know, if you're familiar with Kevin Wilson from the S-Rock company, or S-Rock Group, he posted on LinkedIn today an old picture that he had from, I believe it was 1997, with him and the Budweiser frogs. And then he called out a few of us in the industry to post some pictures. So Kevin, I got your message, and I'm digging through the archives, hopefully trying to find a NRA Hatco picture from perhaps before I was even born. I think that would be great. But it got me thinking, you know, NRA was supposed to start this weekend, and clearly we're not going to be there, right? And I've got a real love-hate relationship with NRA. I love it, and for the short list of positive things in my life, there's a long list of negatives, and NRA emphasizes one of those. See, in the great state of Wisconsin here, we have this lovely thing called bar time, because it turns out that I'm not responsible enough to actually send myself home at a decent hour. I need the bartender to say, Ryan, we're closing, and it's time for you to go home. I've spent one too many days in Chicago taking a cab ride home and taking what amounts to be a short nap before showing up at the booth the next morning. So I love NRA, but I hate NRA. And it got me thinking. I'm going to tell one other story. This was going to be my 10th year. And I know that's not much in this industry. There's probably people in this chat right now that have been there for 15, 20, 30, maybe even 40. Who knows? As long as it's been in existence. But my first NRA show, I was brand new. I was a couple months in, and I was there for the cleanup crew. And I was there for the last couple of days. And on the last day, when it was time to clean up, I had all my bags and everything ready to go. So I placed my briefcase and my, small carry-on bag next to everybody else's as we started cleaning up the booth. And as we're cleaning up and tearing down, all of a sudden I looked and my briefcase was nowhere to be found. Well, if ever anybody knows Tim Thaler, you know that you don't really joke around with Tim, but I was convinced that they hid my bag on me because I was the new guy. And if anybody did it, it was Tim. So I kept going, Tim, seriously, where's my bag? Where's my bag? And if you know him, his response was, I didn't take your effing bag. And although he didn't, shorten a few of the words in there, I got the picture. Turns out someone stole my briefcase. So I had to get on a train back to Wisconsin, have my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, come pick me up while we were living in Johnson Creek, which is about an hour and 15 minutes from the airport, and then had to take the train back down to Chicago the next day with a spare key for, get this, my 1997 Eagle Vision, because at the time that was my winter driver, and I wasn't going to take the Camaro I had down to NRA. So me and NRA have got a love-hate relationship. So I hope you enjoyed the story. I thought it'd be something cool for today. But getting back into today's episode we are going to call Cold or Frost. And we're going to stay with this week's theme. We've been talking a lot about the cold wells and the wells from Hatco. And today I want to talk about the cold shelves versus the frost tops. What's the difference? Remember that episode? Well, today we're going to talk about the differences, and we're going to talk about the different uses. And then last but not least, we're going to sum it up with a special CSU unit, which is a cold shelf undermount. So the major difference between the two of them is really just the amount of refrigerant that we're sending to the frost top. And with that, the frost top has an aluminum coating on the bottom of it so that we're transferring as much cold as possible to that surface, which is why the frost tops always look the same way. So by adding more refrigerant and pushing it more to the frost top, it should give it the best opportunity to frost up. And now some of you might be saying, Ryan, you just said give it the best opportunity. I mean, it's a frost top. It should always frost. Well, yes and no. You have to understand that the temperature will always be cold enough to frost, but there's a multitude of different, extenuating circumstances as to whether or not you're going to visually get frost building up on there. You can talk about external room temperature. You can talk about the air movement. You can talk about relative humidity in the room. All of these play an important role in whether or not the top is getting frosted or not. Now, typically, most of the time, you're going to get frost on the frost top without an issue. But again, the minute I say that, somebody's going to put it in Arizona where they've got zero humidity and it's not going to actually have visible frost. The surface will remain below freezing temperature, but you may not have that nice frosty layer that everybody's looking for. So that's why I always am a little careful when I guarantee it's going to do something. Let's talk about the cold side. On the cold side, you're going to have less refrigerant going to the actual surface, and then you're going to have different materials. And if you're using swanstone, it is not going to frost most of the time because the swanstone actually acts as an insulator. So you may get more condensation on a cold shelf than you would on a frost top. But your surface temperatures are still going to remain below freezing temperature. So, you know, the ideal settings for both of them, if you look in the manual, is a room temperature between 65 and 86 degrees. That's pretty normal. We can handle that. And both of them come out of the factory defaulted at 25 degrees Fahrenheit. So you can see both of them are set the same way. The temperature should reach the same, but one's going to get more frost than the other depending upon, you know, the environmental changes. Okay, so now let's get chat going here. Let's talk about the different uses. If you want to pull up the chat box, or if you're watching on YouTube, use the comments below and let me know some of the best examples that you've seen for a frost top or for a cold shelf, whether that's a school, whether it was a hospital, what kind of products were you putting on there? So go ahead and start putting those in now. We'll kind of catch up on those when we get to the end, and I'll keep moving on. What we need to do is talk about some of the different uses. Now, what I always say is the number one thing to look for when choosing a cold top or a frost top is presentation, presentation, presentation. And why is that number one? Well, because we're going to recommend you use the exact same food products on both of them. Those are non-hazardous food products, stuff that's not going to go bad, that's not going to remain in the danger zone, things like salads and jellos and drinks. Those are all safe things to put on there that will remain chilled and remain cold without putting anybody's health at risk. So going back to presentation, if I want my presentation to visually show frost, to really tell the customer that this is cold product, the frost top is the way to go. If I want to show a very clean swanstone look, maybe I'm going for a particular decor as opposed to more of an industrial look, then the swanstone cold shelf is the way to go. So presentation becomes the number one reason for me to choose a cold or a frost top, even though the application remains relatively the same. The other thing to take into account is whether or not I want a flush, flat top, or if I want a little recess, like you see here in the picture, you can put a full-size sheet pan on there and it falls in the recess and it doesn't slide and move around. Now, when you do have a cold shelf that is getting some frost, you could see product sliding and moving on it because it doesn't have those lips on the side. So those are all the main reasons that I would choose a cold or a frost. Now, you can see here's a picture of the frost top with the full-size sheet pans on there. And then again, non-hazardous food products. And one other thing to point out, when I'm using any cold shelf or frost top, the size of the units, the size of the product that you're putting on there matters. For example, tall products are going to have more of an issue maintaining their cold because less of the surface area is touching the actual top. So the way we talk about that is a good story that Brad Stokel tells in Hatco University. So here in Wisconsin, we get a lot of snow. And if I were to go out and sit on a snowbank, my butt is going to get cold, but my head is not. I mean, depending upon the outside weather, of course. But the actual cold from the snowbank itself is not going to get to the top of my head. Same thing here. The product that's touching the surface is going to remain cold. Product that is up and lifted off of that is not going to remain cold, which is another reason why we stress non-hazardous food products. This is a swanstone example, so if you like the cleaner stone look, there you have it. And then we have here a cold shelf undermount. Now, this is a special unit because it's a unit that actually goes underneath of a granite or a quartz or a natural stone. Now there's some guidelines you need to follow, but with this cold shelf, you should be able to get frost on the stone if it's given enough time to cool. And then again, there's some good relative humidity in the room. The environment is favorable for it. You should be able to get frost on there because that natural stone really retains a lot of temperature. So if you let it run for a couple of hours, maybe 2 hours or so, you get that stone nice and cold. If you've been to Hatco University, you can see we have a green granite top that we place. You know, sometimes Edward does his induction unit on there with the strawberries and the melted chocolate. Sometimes we just have drinks on there, but you can see the frost does start to develop. Now, one side note here, we do have hot and cold shelves. There is no hot and cold undershelf for the same reasons we struggle with the induction units. You don't want to put extreme hot and extreme cold into a natural stone product. You will find the natural fissures and cracks, and it is the surefire way to find the weak points and probably crack that stone, which is extremely expensive to replace. So remember that. Now, the CSU, cold shelf undermount, with the right thermal mastic, will give you a great cold surface with one of the cleanest looks out there because it's the exact granite that you're going for, the exact marble that you're going for. And with that, that's going to wrap up today's conversation. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. If you do have any questions today, as always, go down to the chat box and feel free to ask away. Let's see. April, they changed the NAFM location. Was looking forward to New Orleans, not Orlando. Yes, April, I know. I am extremely disappointed because in my travels in this industry, one of the few places I have not been is actually kind of that southeastern part of the United States, and New Orleans being one of them, being in the food industry, I was really looking forward to getting some good New Orleans food. So I'm also a little disappointed. I will have to make it out there on my own sometime. Any other questions today? Awesome. If you can think of one, go ahead and put it in there. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my screen again for everyone's favorite part. Oh, wait, Brent. We got Brent. Anyone want to meet me in New Orleans anyway? The original dates were close to Mardi Gras. Yeah, Brent. I'm actually afraid to go there with you. You know all the places to go. All righty. Here we have it. Let's get into our memes for today. And the first one, now picture Edward Nunn saying this to you, and I'll try my best. This cleaning with alcohol is total rubbish. Nothing gets done after the first bottle. Not so good. I'll keep doing. I'll keep trying. And now with everybody having to wear masks, I just want to put out a public service announcement. These are all the wrong ways to wear a mask, and the last one is the correct way to wear a mask. And this last one came in from Jay Bronco at Johnson Pike. This is the one I was referring to before we started recording. Mom, we need haircuts. I'm dad. No, that's not true in my household because Lord knows I would love to have a head of hair like that, but unfortunately I do not. So those are our memes for today. Thank you everybody for joining in. If you are catching on YouTube, want to be part of the conversation, as always, description below. If you want to know every time Hatco is posting a video, simply hit the bell notification and show us you're enjoying the content by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Thanks everybody and have a great day.